Welcome to Tech Leaders Today with your host, Cassie Crossley. All comments, views, and opinions expressed on this show are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers. Now here's Cassie Crossley.
Welcome to Tech Leaders Today. I'm here with OConnor. Oscar started his career in IT in the 1980s and has enjoyed a number of leadership roles in IT and cybersecurity. In October 2016, Oscar joined the Board of Qufaro at Bletchley Park as CTO. Qufaro is a new privately funded venture. Qufaro is building an investment fund to help incubate and nurture exciting and innovative startups and early-stage firms in the field of cybersecurity. The other main focus is on education. Qufaro is building the first National College of Cybersecurity, which will open for students in September 2018. Welcome, Oscar.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have an interest in cybersecurity dating back to when I worked at McAfee. And I am very interested in the topics of where we are going in the future. But first of all, with people, cybersecurity is a difficult field for somebody just to go to school for. So we'll talk about your future school in a moment. Because what I've seen is that hands-on experience in combating cybersecurity and understanding cybersecurity builds the type of knowledge people need. So how do you find people in technology that has the cybersecurity background that's required in today's environment?
I think in terms of what I'm involved in today, if you think about the school-aged children, what we want to find, it's not people who have any specific aptitude in maths or cryptography or art or linguistics. It's people who enjoy playing games. Because when you think about the whole field of cybersecurity, there are bad guys trying to do stuff, and there are good guys trying to prevent them from doing that stuff. And it's not a huge leap of the imagination to turn those kind of scenarios into game-like environments. Lots and lots of people play the likes of Call of Duty, where you're on the side of the angels and the dark side of the forces, the bad guys, and you've got to work various things out in order to defeat your adversary. I don't think cybersecurity is that much different from that. Okay, there are some technical skills that are specific to the field, and we need to find people who have the capability to learn them. I think certainly in the UK, one of our big problems as a group of employers in the industry and in the customer domain, the companies who buy services from experts, is there aren't enough people who have the expertise. There are a large number of initiatives, both funded by government and funded by individual organisations, with apprenticeships, with training courses, with graduate programs, and they are seeking to address the balance, but there is no silver bullet, and the more different avenues we can explore, the more likely we are to succeed. So at Qufaro, what we're trying to achieve, and in fact what we are building, I was actually walking through what will become the National College of Cybersecurity only this afternoon, is to find 16-year-olds, 15 and 16, who have done their mid-level, what in the UK are GCSEs, and I'm sure everyone else has their own equivalents, who are looking forward to what do they do to get them into university, to get into a higher apprenticeship, or to get a job. The college that will open to students in 2018, September 2018, is looking to find 15 and 16-year-olds who have some kind of nascent talent in some part of the cybersecurity spectrum. That may be pattern recognition, it may be coding, it may be cryptography, it may be puzzle solving. And one of the things that we are working very hard on is a mechanism to identify that talent that will not leave potential students out because we only concentrate on maths or whatever it may be. At the moment in the UK, we have in the last week been granted educational centre status to offer the first 16 to 19-year-old qualification in cybersecurity. It's called a City and Guilds Extended Project Qualification. It's something you do alongside your A-levels. You do a project, you write it up, and if you do well, it gives you more points to get into university. And it makes you that little bit more attractive to employers seeking apprentices or potential employees.
How do you identify those problem solvers, those puzzle addicts? Because that's not a class. Like you said, you can't look at just math scores. Do you give them a separate test? What are you planning to construct to be able to identify those resources? Great question. Not sure there's an easy answer. We're looking at a variety of mechanisms. One of the supporters of the Qufaro initiative is the UK's CyberSecurity Challenge, which has, as one of its focus areas, is on encouraging and running competitions for schools. The last 2 years, I think, certainly last year, the schools competition was won by a team of 13-year-old girls, which is really encouraging. Part of our outreach in terms of recruitment will be to make use of the relationship we have with the Cybersecurity Challenge, to reach out to the schools who have already expressed an interest and ask them to help us identify kids who could benefit from 2 years free education in a boarding school where, alongside whatever A-levels they choose to study, they can study cybersecurity with access to some of the greatest minds and the greatest levels of experience that the UK has to offer. That's amazing. I had not considered taking it to that age group. We obviously have lots of hackathons that reach the teenage population in regards to the STEM movement, but to focus on cybersecurity and truly integrate it into a school-like structure at that age is brilliant. Thank you for saying so. We all think so too. It's one of the things that most excited me about this whole project. One of the things that I think the education system lacks, I say that generally, not just in the UK, is when we teach a subject, we tend to teach a subject in isolation, as if it is a complete thing in and of itself. One of the things we are aiming to do within the college, and obviously there is a huge amount of work to do on curriculum between now and when the college opens in September next year. But one of the things we're aiming to do with other A-level subjects that the students choose to study is to weave the cybersecurity knowledge or skills or thought processes into the other subjects on the curriculum. I mean, to take one that I guess most people wouldn't think of, if you have a student who really wants to study art, what on earth has that got to do with cybersecurity? Well, if you think back to your spy stories of the 1950s and 60s, how often did you hear of microdots being implanted in photographs? This was a common technique in espionage. The kind of modern equivalent is called steganography, which is about burying a message in an image. And that might be by layering the image, so that if you strip away a couple of layers and move one layer a little bit to the left or right, you see the image, you see the message. Or it may be that somewhere in the code that creates the image, there is a message that your recipient needs to see. Now, why would we not want to teach that kind of stuff to students who have an aptitude for security and want to study art? To my mind, it's an obvious thing that we ought to leave no barriers to entry other than the potential to become one of the experts that the UK and the world needs on the light side of the force. Well, that's very exciting. I really like that because you're not taking it just from a single approach. You're taking it wherever they are best done. It's not just about going in the back door. I love that. It's really understanding the full framework or finding areas that people can take a balance so that they're not isolated in just one aspect, which is, back-end coding. Perfect. Yeah.
I think you've managed to encapsulate what we're about in ways I could only dream of.
Let's take it to the topic of cybersecurity as a technology and what's happening in today's world. With cybersecurity, there's so many different aspects happening right now. There is just the defense that's needed for attacks. There is ransomware. There are so many different happenings in the world. I believe that in the last decade, it was primarily ignored, but in the last year, it has really become front and center news just in everything, whether it be Yahoo or attacks for sites and IoT devices. What kind of initiatives are of interest to you at this moment?
It may sound a little bit trite, but all of them. The IoT, let's take that one for a start. The potential for benefit, both at the individual level and the societal level, is immense. I don't think there's any question about that. However, the potential for harm is also immense. You even have friends who equip their houses with every possible IoT device to help them to control their heating when they're away and all sorts of things. The issue that I'm concerned about, that we're concerned about, is that in general, if you look at the way that IoT devices have been built and implemented, security of the consumer who buys the device has not really been at the forefront of their thinking. Hence, Twitter, for goodness sake, one of the biggest online services in the world with huge amounts of resilience was taken offline by a bunch of webcams. Now, that to me is a bit worrying, and it says to me that the people who are manufacturing and selling IoT devices, for all the benefits that they have, should be giving their consumers the opportunity and, in fact, enforcing the requirement when they install the device to change the administrative password to ensure that no one other than an authorized user can access the device, and absolutely no one other than the manufacturer can install software on it that could repurpose it for malicious use. That's probably quite a big ask, but I can't help feeling that if the IoT's potential is to be realized, then that is an absolutely fundamental requirement. The other is that every IoT device should be natively using IP version 6 rather than IP version 4. It should not require network address translation, so that you as the owner and the support organization, whoever they may be, can clearly identify each device uniquely without relying on somebody else's address translation, which simply opens them up to abuse.
In regards to ransomware, what are your thoughts on that? Because whether it's a small company, mid, or enterprise company, such as the one I've worked for, there are so many opportunities where there could be some type of espionage, some type of threat, some type of ransomware. So what are your thoughts on that?
Let's kind of separate that question out, if I may. Ransomware, given that that's in the news quite a lot, let's take that one first. What ransomware does is, if you are unlucky enough or foolish enough to activate the link or open up the attachment that contains the relevant bit of unpleasantness, it sets about encrypting your hard drive. And in the more malicious versions, it will then seek to find other machines on your network and do the same to them. And after a certain amount of time, I guess they'll work out how long it might take for you to realize that something's not quite right. Someone in your organization will get an email requiring you to pay some money to a certain account or some bitcoins or whatever it is, with the promise that if you pay the money, they'll give you the code that will undo the damage. instinctively and based on a certain amount of research in this field, to simply pay up would be a very, very foolish first step. Part of the problem is that blackmailers being blackmailers, if you pay up easily, they're just going to come back for more, and you don't want that to happen. What you want is to eradicate the problem. Thankfully, most of the big security vendors, they are constantly researching this field and looking for ways, and in many cases have broken and found the relevant decryption codes to undo the ransomware. And I think, and this is the key, is it's not just enough to decrypt the stuff that's been encrypted. You've got to get rid of the stuff that causes it to be encrypted in case the bad guys send a message back to the software and say, well, they paid up, do it again. Ransomware, go to your first port of call should be to your malware vendor to say, how can you help? Your second port of call should be to, and I would hope that most of the sensible businesses that will be listening to this will have on retainer an security incident responder. That's your second port of call, to tap into their network to find a way of removing the problem and analysing how it got in order to prevent it coming back in again. On espionage, I think we must, and I'm certainly not alone in this way of thinking, the traditional view of how you secure your network is to put a nice chunky firewall on the boundary and let it get rid of or prevent any unpleasantness, any malicious actor accessing your network. That might have been a good idea when, phones were just phones, when tablets didn't exist, when access to corporate facilities and services through smartphones and tablets weren't possible. We now have to assume that the network, the corporate network, has no definable perimeter at all. If you could draw a logical line around what you think is your infrastructure, you must assume that it is porous and that bad guys will and indeed have got into your network. As a responsible custodian of customer data, of commercial confidential data, of your business secrets, you need to be monitoring everything that happens on your network. You need to be monitoring how people access systems, how people communicate with other people, how systems communicate with other systems. Over time, and it's not an instantaneous thing, over time, you get to understand what normal behavior looks like, that certain systems only communicate with certain other systems. But once you have an idea and you have a good understanding of what normal network traffic looks like, you're able to tune monitoring systems to tell you when something unusual happens. Because you may not always want to just stop it. You may want to understand who's doing it. You may want to do some analysis on what exactly they're doing so that you have a chance to predict potential damage and also engage either your own legal team or law enforcement to go after the people who are invading your networks.
That's great advice. If people have questions or want to contact you, how should they reach you?
Email OConnor, that's OConnor, at Qufaro, QUFARO.UK.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on Tech Leaders today.
Anytime.
I want to thank you so much for listening today. If you love this podcast, please do share it with your friends and colleagues, and please leave a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher because it makes a difference for circulation. For the show notes and other great info, enter your email into the mailing list at techleaderstoday.com. Thank you.